Hello and welcome to the Bucketlister Podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford, along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Bucketlister Podcast. I am your host, Keith Crockford, and today I'm going to be chatting to you about my top 5 bucket list trips. Now, I was interviewed the other day, and someone asked me this question. I've always said that it's very difficult for me to look at which is my favorite trip, which is my top 5, which is my top 10, and that's always been really difficult because I love them all for various different reasons. But I did then start to really think about this and put together a list. And I came up with a list and I was crossing them out and adding trips in and thinking, well, actually, no. And it was just really, really hard to do. And I haven't been able to come up with a top 5. I've actually, in the end, managed to come up with a top 6. And I just wanted to go through those with you today and to explain my reasons why they are in my top 6. And, you know, it was a really difficult thing to do. I love all of our trips. There isn't one that I think, oh, I wouldn't go and lead that trip if I had the opportunity to go and do it. So it was really hard to condense them into a list. But I've come up with my top 6, and I think it's right. I think it's where I would go. And coming in at number 6 is our Sahara Desert trek. Now, Morocco is a country, is one we talk about all the time, and it's an amazing destination. And all the trips to Morocco, I really, really love. But the Sahara Desert trek for me is the one that is so different to everything else. We do lots of trekking trips, and you know, if you want to go trekking, you can go trekking all over the world. But to walk in the biggest desert in the world, for me, is what ticks that one off. To see no other travelers and to see no other trekkers is what makes that Sahara Desert trip so amazing. The views you get, camping out under the stars, the food that gets cooked for you whilst you're on the trek, just really, really make the Sahara Desert trek, for me, such an amazing experience. Now, you still get the hustle and bustle of Marrakesh either side of the trip, so that's kind of why I put that one in, because it does give more than just trekking in the Sahara. But the other thing why I love this trip so much is if you go and stay in Marrakesh, as you're wandering through Marrakesh, they will sell you excursions to the Sahara Desert. And actually, you know, where they take you to those camps is literally just on the edge. Where we're going is right into the Sahara. We go to the highest dunes in Morocco. I mean, it's a long drive to get down there. You do spend a day traveling to get to that destination. But once you're there, it is so, so worth it. And that is why the Sahara Desert trek had to be on the list for me. And when you see the reviews of people on that trip and how it changes them by doing the Sahara Desert trek, you can't really appreciate it until you go there and see it yourself, until you go and climb that biggest dune and watch the sunset looking out over the Sahara Desert. It's very hard to explain. Like, the pictures make it look amazing, but actually the feeling you get when you were there is one that I just want to go back and back and back for. There are oases where you can go swimming. Obviously depends on the rainfall for the year, etc. But there is the opportunity to then go and do that when you are there. So yeah, for me, the Sahara Desert trek had to be on the list. And unfortunately, I couldn't get it into the top 5, which is why I've got a top 6 list. But I felt that it had to get in there. So for me, number 6 is the Sahara Desert Trek. Number 5 then is Everest Base Camp. That for me, it is. If you look at the trips that we run lots of at the Bucket List Company, it is the Kilimanjaros, the Everest Base Camps, the Machu Picchus. They are what's on people's bucket lists, and that's what they want to tick off. And Everest Base Camp for me is a proper bucket list tick. Now, it's a really long trip. It's a long trek, 13 days, 17 to 18 day trip in total. So it is a long one. But again, as I said, when we were talking about the Sahara Desert Trek just a minute ago, you can go trekking anywhere in the world. There's lots of trekking trips around the world, but Everest Base Camp, trekking in those mountains and the views you get, and it changes every time. And that's the thing I love about it. And the reason why I don't get bored going back to Everest Base Camp time and time and time again. Because one day, you'll get up in the morning and, it'll be clagged in and you won't see anything in the morning. And then in the afternoon, it lifts and you get the most amazing views. And it just changes all the time. And I just think, for me, when you're trekking in the Kumba region, you're walking along through these massive mountains, and they don't look massive to you because you're already at that altitude. Like, you're walking past 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 meter peaks, and they're just there right next to you. And it is just such an amazing view to see and to be part of. And the other reason for me why the Everest Base Camp gets on the list for me is the people. The local people is what makes it such an amazing destination. From the hustle and bustle to Kathmandu, to once you get out on the trek, going through the local villages, staying in the local tea houses. That's why, for me, Everest Base Camp needed to be on that list. Lots of people say Everest Base Camp is too busy, it's too over commercialized. I don't think, when you're out there on the trail, I've had it once when it was really busy on an Everest Base Camp trek, and that was purely because the flights got restricted and lots and lots of people all ended up flying in at the same time. And it did seem a little bit busy, but all the other times I've done it, and I've been there plenty of times now, you're not walking past mass groups all the time. Like, I never feel like claustrophobic with groups. There was only, like I say, that one time, and that was really flight related. It wasn't actually an everyday occurrence. And also as well, with it being such a long trek, I actually kind of quite like the commercialism of it. I think for a lot of people, when they're stepping out of their comfort zone and doing something for the first time, and for a lot of people, Everest Base Camp is a first time trek that they've done like that. Having that opportunity to go and get snacks and resupply and go and grabbing a nice coffee and just being able to go out for a walk once you arrive into the tea house that evening, I think really, really does make that trip for a lot of people to have that that just extra commercialism about it. It just sort of makes it easier, I think, for people. But yeah, Everest Base Camp for me had to be on the list. Again, if I get the opportunity to go to Everest Base Camp, it's one that I'm more than happy to jump on every time, just because of the views, the people. Like, as I wander through Thamel in Kathmandu when we arrive, and just think of all of the expeditions that from the past years that land in Kathmandu and then start their journey to whatever it is they're going to go and climb. I just love the fact that you feel part of that when you're on the trek. You are walking the same path to get to these mountains that everybody else walks as well. So for me, that's why Everest Base Camp needed to be on the list. Coming in at number 4, then, I've put the Maldives, because I have just literally fallen in love with the Maldives as a destination. Now, completely different from our trekking trips. Obviously, at the Bucket List Company, we started off as a trekking company, and then we've kind of moved into adventure travel, kept the treks as well, but we're also offering more and more adventurous travel trips. And you might think, well, the Maldives isn't an adventurous travel trip. It's a luxury island where you can go and chill out. And actually, that can't be further from the case. There is so much to do in the Maldives, so much to learn. Again, the real Maldives trip that we do at the Bucket List Company basically is about staying on local islands with local people. And the Maldivians are the most friendliest people you'll ever meet. The food is just amazing. It is just such a lovely destination to visit. And I think for a lot of people, they have that misconception that the Maldives is a couple's luxury resort complex where you go for your honeymoon. And that isn't the case. And I kind of want to change that stigma with it, really, that actually you can go to the Maldives, you can go and experience it, you can go and enjoy it. And that's why we launched our liveaboard trip to the Maldives last week, because it was because I fell in love with the Maldives. It's because I want to go back that trip was launched. I had people on the real Maldives trip that wanted to go back, but obviously they didn't want to go back and repeat the same trip. They wanted to go and do something different. And that's where the Maldives trip, the liveaboard trip, came from, was having those conversations with our customers that they said, it's such an amazing destination and I just want to go back and experience it again. Like from the moment you walk out of the airport and see the color of the sea, like straight outside the door of the airport, you're just transfixed. If you love the water and you love exploring what's underneath it, and that doesn't have to be from a scuba diving perspective. Our real Maldives trip, the activities are all snorkeling based, so it's able for anybody to go and do it. If you want to have a buoyancy aid because you don't swim very well and you just want to sit there and float and look in the water, then you can completely do that. And, I think if you took the color of the sea from the Maldives and it was on a Dulux color chart, it would just be called perfect blue, because you just never see water that color. The beaches, understanding the sustainability of the Maldives. Obviously, the highest point of the Maldives is 14 meters above sea level. So there is definitely no trekking really to be done in the Maldives. Although, as we said when we were on the real Maldives trip, like every day we were doing activities and you were knocking out 15,000 steps a day without any worries, exploring the local islands and doing things. So it certainly is an active holiday. And one that I think, if it's on your bucket list, but you think you can only go there when you are on your honeymoon or with your partner, then get that misconception out of your head, because you can definitely go to the Maldives, explore the local islands. And, with our real Maldives trip, there are, we do a resort island stay, but we go and stay on an independent resort that has great sustainable credentials, that are really trying to do something and look after the island and make sure the island can be as sustainable as possible. And you just learn about a lot of the issues that the Maldives have, whether it's from the coral bleaching, from the water temperatures to the plastic problem. We went and did a beach clean whilst we were on our real Maldives trip. And, within 10 minutes, we collected 25 kilos of plastic. And a lot of this plastic is not the Maldives problem. It's what gets washed up on shore in the Maldives. So it's about educating. And I think the guests that were on that real Maldives trip had a real education about the Maldives, but also about the issue the Maldives has. And if someone said, do you want to fly to the Maldives tomorrow? I'd be packing my bag and straight on a plane. And I absolutely have fallen in love with the Maldives and would go there time and time again. So that had to get on the list. Coming in at number 3 then was a new one for me, because if you had asked me this 8 months ago, 6 months ago, it wouldn't have got on the list because I hadn't done it yet with the Bucket List company. But coming in at number 3 is our Vietnam and Cambodia trip. I really, really enjoyed that trip. I had such an education on that trip, and felt that we really did go and see the best of what Vietnam and Cambodia had to offer. And I would go back and do that trip tomorrow. There is so much to do, so much to see. It was the perfect time of the year to go. It was super hot. It was really warm, but we got to see every, so we started off in Hanoi. We went to Halong Bay and did the cruise on Halong Bay, which was just amazing. It was like stepping onto the Orient Express. And in terms of the boat, like, the boat, the food, everything was amazing. We got to kayak around Halong Bay. We went down to Hanoi. We went to Sapa and did some trekking in Sapa. And I would love to explore Sapa some more. Actually, the trekking there was amazing. And then we went down and went through to Cambodia. Learned about Cambodia, and again, it was a real education. Both Vietnam and Cambodia actually was a real education for me. Like, I thought I knew quite a lot about the Vietnam War, but learning more and more about it when you're actually there in country was so interesting. And then likewise with Cambodia, you know about the Cambodian history, but it's very difficult to understand, I think. And when you're there and you get everything explained to you, and for me, the thing that kind of got me is I'm 44 now, and it finished the year before I was born. So in terms of, I don't see myself as being really old, but in terms of that, I kind of got, it really surprised me that this had kind of happened almost in my lifetime, and how much of an atrocity it was of what had actually happened to that country. And to see that country starting to flourish now, to see the population growing. I mean, the average age of the population of Cambodia is now in their mid-20s. That is the age of the main population. So think that the country is rebuilding as it is, and it is flourishing, and it is one place that I cannot wait to go back to and see how it's changed in the short period it's been since I last went. And that trip just had to get into my top 5 because I really, really did enjoy it, and it's one that I think other bucket listers should go on. Most people, if they're going to Southeast Asia, they're doing Thailand, but definitely have a look at Vietnam and definitely have a look at Cambodia as well. And I think that although we combine the two and see the best bits, I think there's potentially a trip in both countries separate. But if you're struggling for time off, which is obviously what we kind of appeal to, and you're not going to go and spend 3 months traveling, then we do tick off all of the best bits on that trip within kind of that 2-week holiday trip. So it's there for you to kind of be able to see it all and decide if you want to go back and explore more in the future. But that trip, Vietnam, Cambodia, just had to make my list. Coming in at number 2, then it had to be Kilimanjaro. But I've kind of cheated on the Kilimanjaro because I've also added in the safari and the Zanzibar while you're there. So I can kind of put a couple of trips into one there. But Kilimanjaro for me had to be on the list. It's on lots of people's bucket lists. I've done Kilimanjaro a lot of times now. I love Kilimanjaro. It is one of my favorite treks to do. I love the people out there. I've got so many friends in Tanzania and people I've climbed the mountain with over the years, and I love going back and seeing them. And I also love the fact that the thing I love about Kilimanjaro the most is that it is a standalone mountain. And unlike Everest Base Camp, when you get to the top of Kilimanjaro, you've achieved something. You're stood on top of one of the 7 summits. You're stood on top of the highest freestanding mountain in the world. You're stood on top of the highest point in Africa at that when you're there at that time. And for me, that's a massive tick for people. And I think emotionally, I see more out of the groups when they're on top of Kilimanjaro than some of our other trips. And, we do some other higher mountains, more mountaineering style. But I think with Kilimanjaro, people can climb Kilimanjaro without any experience. It could be that Kilimanjaro is the first time that they've ever done a trip like this. So, their achievement for them is amazing when they get to that summit and reach the top. So for me now, the enjoyment is getting people to the top of Kilimanjaro. I've ticked it off my bucket list from various different routes plenty of times. So for me now, leading a trip to Kilimanjaro is more about the journey of our clients than it is my journey, if you like. I want to make sure that I get all of my group to the top of Kilimanjaro when we're on it. And we achieve that. I've achieved that for the last 4 times that I've done it, that everybody has stood on the summit, which is an amazing achievement when you consider that the success rate of Kilimanjaro apparently is around the 67% mark. And we've been hitting 100% time and time again. And say my last 4 trips to Kilimanjaro, everybody has reached the summit, which is huge when you get there. It just makes the group really bond together well. And that moment that you share together when everyone's on the top is just incredible. The views on the way up are amazing. I think, if you ever want to see the perfect sunrise, it's on summit night of Kilimanjaro when you're getting to the top of the crater rim and it gets to sunrise. It's the most beautiful picture in the world. And yeah, that's why Kilimanjaro for me had to be on the list. You have such a great time with the guides and the porters out there. We've got such a great team, such a friendly team. And it just needs to be on the list. If you've not done it before, then get it on your bucket list. It so deserves to be. And that's why I was, as well with us, you get the option when you finish to either book a safari or book a Zanzibar trip, or as so many people do, they book both once they finish their Kilimanjaro trip, because I think extensions are really important onto trips, because for me, it gets you to see more of the country. And the biggest expense on a trip in reality, or a biggest part of the cost, is your international flight. And if you're paying an international flight, then, I remember taking somebody away a few years ago. We run a separate safari to Tanzania. And I remember taking somebody to that. and she had done Kilimanjaro with me a few years before. And she was like, I just so wish I booked the safari there and then. I saw all the pictures that everybody had taken when they had come back. And like, I was just gutted that I didn't book it. And I knew I had to go back and do a safari in Tanzania. So she booked another international flight and then flew back out and did the safari separately. So like, if you can afford to add it on when you're doing the trip, then adding that safari on, it is the best time to do it, because you've already paid a huge proportion of that cost of the safari on the international flight. So again, it adds it into like a 2-week holiday as well, because a Kilimanjaro trip is like 10, 11 days, 3-day safari on the end of it. You're there, you've got a 2-week holiday then. And so many people, again, talking about the Maldives earlier, and Zanzibar is just such an amazing destination. Again, the color of the water, the beaches. If you love scuba diving, it's a great place to go scuba diving. There's also a lot of history on Zanzibar. And if you just want to chill out after climbing a mountain, it's just such a lovely place to do it. Obviously, on safari, you are, in a safari vehicle for the majority of the time. But if you just want to chill out, then the Zanzibar add-on is the perfect way to finish off your Kilimanjaro trek. And then people may have heard this before. I've kind of alluded to what would be my number one in the past, and it is Chile and Easter Island. I've been lucky enough now to visit Chile and Easter Island twice, and I would go back again in a heartbeat. It's such an amazing destination. Chile, I love the Atacama Desert. I mean, I always thought I was a mountain guy, and I've had this conversation with Dave so many times that how much we are both drawn to deserts now. But the Atacama Desert in Chile, Santiago's an amazing city. And then, you've got the Atacama Desert where you explore. And even in the desert, like, let's be honest, we were at 5,600 meters whilst we're in the Atacama Desert. So although I say mountains in deserts, like, you can combine both in the Atacama. And I really love the Atacama. San Pedro, the place you stay, it's just like this most amazing little town. It had the most amazing bakery in it, which is owned by this French guy. It serves the best coffee, the best croissants. And you're in the middle of the Atacama Desert. It's got some really cool bars with live music in this little town. And it's definitely one, again, to tick off the bucket list. And then you get the opportunity to fly to Easter Island. And I just love the fact that that very few people I know have been to Easter Island. And I always say this to people. When people say, why is Chile and Easter Island your favorite destination? I think the reason why Easter Island takes the tick for me is because if I walk into a pub, and if I said I've been to Everest Base Camp, their mate Dave's done Everest Base Camp. And if I say I've been to Kilimanjaro, oh yeah, my mate Paul's done Kilimanjaro. But if you say you've been to Easter Island, very few people know anyone that's been to Easter Island. And for me, that's a great draw for me. Again, talking about the Sahara Desert coming in at number 6, the reason it had to make the list was the fact that very few people trek the Sahara Desert, but also you don't see very many people while you're there. And actually, it's pretty much the same on Easter Island. There's not a lot of people around on Easter Island. There is only one flight a day going in and one flight a day going out. There are only so many people that can be on it. You can only stay on Easter Island for 7 days, so people aren't spending long times on there. And I imagine for most people, they're kind of doing sort of 5 days on Easter Island. So you can imagine if you've only got one plane going in, one plane going out, there's only 5 plane loads of people on the island, and there aren't very many locals living on Easter Island either. So it just feels a really chilled out Polynesian island that you can explore. The history is amazing. And like there are plenty of activities to do while you're there. Again, the food's amazing. You're in the middle of the ocean. The fish is just to die for. People are super, super friendly. It's got that Polynesian island vibe to it. And again, it's definitely one that I think should be added to people's bucket list. And it's a long way away. And that's why people don't tend to do it. It's an expensive trip. It does involve a lot of flying. But for me, it has to take the number one spot out of all the destinations that I've been to. That is the one for me that is number one on the list. And if I had to only ever choose one more place to go back to, then Chile and Easter Island, I think would be the one for me. So that's been my rundown on my top 5, which is actually my top 6. I've hoped you've kind of enjoyed listening to what I've, my top 5 and my reasons for being them. I hope it's inspired you maybe to look into some of those destinations a little bit more. I'll put links to all of those trips in the show notes for you to go and have a look at. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. I think what I'd like to do in the coming weeks is try and do the same thing with Dave and Jake and ask them what their top 5 bucket list trips are. And then we can compare notes and see how it changes from me to them. But anyway, that's it from me this week. Hope you've enjoyed the episode, and I'll catch up with you for another episode next week. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucketlister Podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.